Most people believe intelligence means winning arguments. They think the sharper your response, the stronger your evidence, the more powerful you become. But real life does not work that way. Some of the most mentally exhausted people you will ever meet are those who spend their energy trying to prove themselves to minds that were never open in the first place. Every pointless argument quietly steals something from you: your peace, your focus, your clarity. And the moment someone gains control over your emotions, the conversation is no longer about truth. It becomes about ego, pride, emotional dominance. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly not to become like the chaos around him, not because the world would suddenly become reasonable, but because protecting your inner state is one of the highest forms of discipline a person can develop. There is always a subtle moment when a conversation stops being about understanding and starts becoming a contest of emotion. At first, everything feels reasonable enough to continue. You explain yourself carefully. You choose your words with patience. Part of you still believes that clarity can repair the tension. The other person nods, perhaps even pretends to listen. For a brief moment, it feels like the conversation might actually lead somewhere useful. Then the atmosphere shifts. Their tone sharpens. Your words begin returning distorted. Simple explanations are treated like personal attacks. Facts no longer matter, because the conversation is no longer connected to facts at all. It becomes connected to pride. And pride has a strange ability to turn even intelligent people into prisoners of their own emotions. Most people do not notice this shift immediately because they are too focused on defending themselves. They assume persistence will solve the problem. If they explain one more time, perhaps the misunderstanding will disappear. If they provide stronger logic, perhaps the other person will finally become reasonable. But the harder they push for resolution, the further the conversation drifts from it. Emotional people rarely calm down because someone presents better evidence. In many cases, evidence feels threatening because accepting it would require humility. And humility is difficult for a mind deeply attached to being right. This is why pointless arguments become exhausting so quickly. One person is attempting to create clarity. The other is attempting to protect identity. Those are completely different goals. And conversations built on opposing goals eventually collapse under frustration. Epictetus reminded his students that suffering begins when people try to control what does not belong to them. Another person's reaction do not belong to you. Their ego does not belong to you. Their inability to listen is not your responsibility to repair. Yet many people spend years carrying the emotional burden of conversations they never had the power to fix. They replay arguments in their minds while driving, working, or trying to sleep. They imagine sharper responses, better timing, different words. Meanwhile, the person who created the chaos has already moved on emotionally, leaving them alone with unresolved frustration. The argument ends externally, but internally, it continues for hours. The mind keeps searching for closure where closure does not exist. That is the hidden cost of foolish conflict. It follows you long after the moment itself has passed. This is why silence can become one of the most powerful tools a disciplined mind possesses. Silence is often misunderstood. People associate it with weakness, with surrender, with having nothing to say. In reality, silence can reflect enormous self-control. It takes far more awareness to remain composed than it does to react impulsively. Anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can defend their pride. But staying calm, truly calm, not suppressed, not cold, but genuinely steady, that is rare. That is difficult. And that is powerful. Silence interrupts the instinct to defend. It creates space between feeling and reaction. And within that space, clarity begins returning. Most foolish individuals depend entirely on the absence of that pause. They provoke, exaggerate, interrupt, and pressure because emotional reactions give them influence. The moment someone becomes visibly frustrated, they gain confirmation that their words are controlling the atmosphere. But when someone expects resistance and receives composure instead, confusion begins appearing almost immediately. Their emotional energy has nowhere to land. Their contradictions become visible. Their impatience reveals itself naturally. Insecurity starts leaking through every sentence. People reveal themselves most clearly when they are no longer receiving the emotional reaction they hoped to control. Seneca warned repeatedly about the danger of anger, because anger creates temporary blindness. It narrows perception and pushes people toward actions they later regret. That is why he believed delay was one of the highest forms of discipline. Even a few seconds of silence can interrupt the emotional momentum of a situation. A pause creates distance between instinct and action, and within that distance, clarity has room to return. Over time, this discipline transforms the way conflict is experienced internally. Conversations that once felt threatening begin losing their emotional grip. The urge to correct everyone weakens. The need to prove your intelligence starts fading. More energy becomes available for things that genuinely matter, because less attention is wasted feeding unnecessary tension. Silence no longer feels like suppression. It begins feeling like freedom. There is another side to foolish behavior that many people fail to notice, because they become too emotionally involved to observe it clearly. Not every conflict begins because someone truly cares about truth or understanding. Sometimes conflict exists because attention itself feels emotionally rewarding to certain people. The tension becomes their source of significance. The moment they provoke frustration or defensiveness from someone else, they feel powerful. Your reaction becomes proof that they matter. People who constantly seek emotional dominance are rarely as secure as they appear. Truly grounded individuals do not need to win every disagreement, because their identity is not dependent on external validation. But insecure minds operate differently. Every disagreement feels dangerous, because it challenges the fragile image they are desperately trying to maintain. Their aggression looks powerful externally, but internally, it usually comes from fear. Recognizing this changes anger in subtle ways. The desire to retaliate weakens because you begin seeing the emotional suffering hidden beneath foolish behavior. Many difficult people are already trapped inside minds that constantly disturb them. Their anger punishes them long before it reaches anyone else. Their insecurity follows them into every interaction. They carry their suffering everywhere, without understanding its source. That perspective creates patience. Not naive patience, realistic patience, grounded in awareness of human imperfection. The Stoics returned constantly to a much quieter question whenever conflict appeared in their lives. What actually matters here? Not what feels satisfying for a few temporary moments. Not what protects pride in front of others. What genuinely improves the quality of your life in the long run? This question changes the entire direction of thought, because it interrupts emotional momentum before it fully takes control. Most impulsive reactions feel important only in the moment. Hours later, they often appear unnecessary, exhausting, or even embarrassing. A sharp response may protect pride temporarily, while damaging peace for the rest of the day. A person may win an argument publicly, while privately carrying frustration, resentment, and mental exhaustion long afterward. The Stoics understood that emotional victories often come with hidden costs that people notice far too late. There is something deeply liberating about no longer needing every person to approve of your perspective. Not because you become careless or arrogant, but because you begin understanding the limits of control. You cannot force maturity into someone emotionally committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot force wisdom into someone addicted to conflict. You cannot force clarity into a mind overwhelmed by ego. Once this becomes fully accepted, emotional reactions begin slowing down naturally. The need to prove yourself weakens. Walking away feels less like defeat and more like intelligence. The mind stops chasing unnecessary battles because it finally understands that not every disagreement deserves emotional investment. Anyone can appear calm when life feels easy. Real discipline appears when frustration, disrespect, or foolishness enters the environment, and the mind still remains steady. That steadiness is not emotional suppression. It is awareness strong enough to prevent temporary emotions from controlling permanent behavior. The strongest individuals often feel no urgent need to prove themselves constantly because their identity is not built on external victory. They are focused on protecting something far more valuable than pride: their clarity, their discipline, their peace of mind. They understand that every unnecessary emotional battle steals attention from things that genuinely matter. Growth requires energy. Wisdom requires reflection. Purpose requires focus. Foolish conflict consumes all three, without offering anything meaningful in return. At the end of the day, foolish people will always exist. There will always be those who seek conflict, attention, and emotional control. But the moment you stop allowing their chaos to enter your mind, you take your power back.